Here we go. Update Brazil. Welcome to Update Brazil, Terça Livre talk show. Want to welcome Mr. Nyquist, Jeff Nyquist, Olavo de Carvalho, and Diana West. Morning, Jeff Nyquist.
Good morning. Good morning to Brazil and all our friends for this first edition of Update Brazil.
Yes, I'm very excited. Good morning, Olavo.
Good morning, Alan. Good morning, Jeffrey. Good morning, Diana.
Morning.
Good morning, Diana.
Good morning. So nice to be with you.
Yes, it's an honor for us. Well, I'm going to start asking what I spoke with Nyquist a lot on this week, right? So is the communism, is the subversion like a paranoia, or what is the reality? What is going on between Brazil and the USA, or better say, what is going on in the world? Do we have a subversion, or it's just because we are freak, or we are crazy, or exists indeed in reality a subversion that is taking care through the world with the communism agenda?
Is that question for me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it can be.
Yes. Sure, I'll start it off. The subversion is so big and deep and dense that we don't see it. It's become like the air we breathe. It goes back decades. Goes back more than a half century, probably a century or more, but in America, we certainly see it having a very big beginning in an institutional way at the presidential level, at the White House level, going back to the 1930s. And so we can talk about the arc of history over the past 80-some years in which our government in America has very much been subverted, very much been changed. And the success of it is that nobody is very conversant or understanding of these various steps, these various incursions, so that people don't even know how to talk about it anymore. And when you mention the idea, are we crazy, we're supposed to believe we're crazy. So that's kind of where we are in very broad strokes.
What about you?
Well, what I would say is that what she said is very well said and is very true. And what I find is talking to people in different countries like Brazil or Romania or Ukraine or Austria or Germany or Sweden, this kind of subversion has gone on everywhere. And the pattern is similar everywhere. The experiences, how we react to it may be different, but we're all being exposed to the same phenomenon, the same movement or religion or philosophy. And it's a militant kind of thing. These people, they burrow in everywhere. And what they've managed to accomplish is mind-boggling. And when you tell people about it who don't know about it, you know, you feel like, do they think I'm crazy? But yet, as Diana points out, as her work shows, and the work of many others that have been long since forgotten, this is a very real thing. Very real.
And it's something that we're not supposed to notice. We're not supposed to understand the links. There's a very interesting, just anecdotal example in just this week's politics here in the United States with our presidential race. Bernie Sanders, who's openly a socialist candidate for president running on the Democratic side in our primaries, which will be beginning in early 2016. The Democratic Socialists of America, which is the socialist party or leading socialist party in America, claims him as a member. He was a member, he has been a member, he has paid dues, and yet for purposes of running in this presidential cycle, they actually have instructed members to disassociate any official links between the party and Bernie Sanders. And they've actually written this in their own, in the Washington, D.C. version. I saw this go by yesterday online. So it's very fascinating to see this effort to disguise him, although he is openly socialist, but to take him away from any institutional home within the Socialist Party of America, the Democratic Socialists of America. So you see always this, the Trojan horse, you see always the front, you see always the effort to confuse people. And this is just a very small, most recent example. There are untold examples, thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of examples, where people are supposed to be confused and deceived into not understanding how these ideas, how these policies, how this ideology has taken hold here. We are absolutely not supposed to realize how socialist, how Marxified we have become. And so in that sense, the subversion has been so successful and extremely advanced. I mean, it's all but complete.
Yeah, it is all but complete. And the thing is people are confused because what the Marxists do is they don't always publicly talk about Marx. They don't talk about Marxist ideology. They have a whole different way of talking in public than they do amongst themselves in private. And this way of talking makes people believe, oh, they're social democrats or they're something else. It's funny, Diana mentions Bernie Sanders. You know, I believe his associates were known at one time years ago as Sandinistas because of their support for Nicaragua. Isn't that right? Am I remembering that right? Back in Vermont.
It sounds right. Yeah, it sounds right. Yeah, I don't know that one, but yeah, sounds right. Why not? Yeah. Our mayor of New York City is a former activist in Nicaragua, Mayor de Blasio.
Yeah, now that's disturbing when so many. I mean, look, we have two countries. Okay, which president of the country has a communist background, has socialist policies? There's problems with their birth certificate or their birth, and then there's questions about their sexual orientation, you know, rumors about their sexual. I mean, which president are we talking about? The president of Brazil or the president of the United States? How can their profiles be so similar? Right?
For sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I mean, it isn't just that they're working out of the same playbook, they're using the same players, you know, the same type of players. They're typecasting these roles.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I want to introduce to American people Olavo de Carvalho because in Brazil, of course, he's very known. He's the most influential person in Brazilian politics and the Brazilian culture right now. Olavo de Carvalho just woke up Brazilian people using his philosophy course. He instigates us to ask ourselves about what is going on in Brazil. Do you think it's normal they change all the policies, this agenda they are doing throughout the world? So Olavo de Carvalho is the most influenced person in Brazil, and in America. That's why we made this Update Brazil. I spoke with Nyquist that we need to make a bridge between us because there are so many likeness between us. Of course, among the world, there are a lot of likeness of the communism agenda. And Olavo de Carvalho got a lot of success in Brazil unmasking the communists. And I would like to hear from Olavo. What is this similarity between us, I mean, America and United States, that we could do to change this situation?
Okay, first of all, I have to say something. I'm very, very happy to be here with these two people who are the authors of two of the most important books ever written about America. I'll show you. American Betrayal and the Fourth World War. These people, Jeffrey and Diana, they don't let themselves to be duped by figure of speech, by slogans, by words. They go right to reality. And these two books are mandatory readings to all my students. These books are absolutely indispensable to anyone who wants to understand what's going on. And so we should start. There is a third book I would like to speak about with an author who is not present. Is the French philosopher Jean-François Revel. The book's called the Great Parade, La Grande Parade. He wrote it in the year 2000, and he asked, how is it possible that 10 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, the communist movement was stronger? It should have disappeared, but now he is stronger than ever. He asked this in 2000. Well, 15 years later, there are many people who still don't see what is happening. They don't see because they are intellectual cowards. This is the worst kind of cowardice ever. Intellectual cowardice. You don't want to see. You always say, no, this is too bad to be true. And then you attach to illusions, to verbal illusions, in order to explain that nothing is happening, everything is okay, and everything is going the best way possible. Many people still have this attitude. Well, in Brazil there are few people because now everybody knows what is happening. 93% of the population is already well informed of the power of the communist movement in Brazil and of the connection between the communism and corruption, because it always starts with corruption. Let's say 7 or 8 years ago, most people still didn't know anything about communism in Latin America, but they started noticing the huge amount of corruption in government, something that never happened before. Because when we speak of corruption, people say, "Oh, this is normal. Politics is always corrupted," but this is not normal. This is something on the scale of billions and billions and billions. They managed to destroy the largest Brazilian company, Petrobras. And they create this a scheme they call the mensalão, the big months. When they bribed everybody in the Congress and both the representatives and the senators, they bribed everybody. This is something people outside Brazil cannot even imagine. And some journalists started denouncing the corruption, but later they noticed that it was not normal corruption. It was a scheme of corruption created to strengthen an organization called the São Paulo Forum. The São Paulo Forum is the headquarters of the communist movement in Latin America. It was founded in the 90s, in 1990, by Lula, the former Brazilian president, and Fidel Castro, to restore the communist movement in Latin America. And it had a great success. It gathers 200 political parties and other organizations, including criminal gangs, drug dealers, and smugglers, and kidnappers, everybody, all beautiful people. Huh? These are wonderful people. And they collaborate with one another. So if the guy commits a crime in one country, he is well received and protected in another country. So the thing is almost infallible. Owing to this factor, Brazil is now the only country where the drug market is growing. It is decreasing everywhere except in Brazil. It's a very prosperous industry. In the FARC, the Colombian Revolutionary Armed Forces, they have the monopoly of drug dealing in Brazil. So this is not a normal corruption. It was a political corruption, a strategical corruption in a large scale. And now everybody in Brazil knows it. But they took 20 years to understand. I have been speaking of this since the 90s. I spoke to students, to the military, to politicians, and to the general public. In the beginning, everybody thought I was crazy completely. They said this is conspiracy theory and so on. But bit by bit, they start understanding what is going on, and now everybody knows. Well, if Brazilian population, which is not normally very well informed, can know and understand this, so the whole world can understand sooner or later. And we have to go on telling people what is really going on, because the communist movement is now more powerful than ever. Listen, the communists dominate the American presidents, they dominate the Vatican, they dominate the United Nations, they dominate everything. They are everywhere. So everything that is everywhere becomes automatically invisible. As Diana said, you cannot ask a fish what is water. A fish doesn't know what is water because it's hiding. Really, what is happening there? What is aggravates the problem formidably is the changes in the communist strategy along the last 40 years. When they started reading Antonio Gramsci, founder of the Italian Communist Party, who created the strategy of cultural revolution and occupational spaces. Occupational spaces means we are everywhere. And really they are everywhere. And this has confused many people, because nobody now makes communist propaganda saying, we will create a communist regime. They have thousands of different names now. And even sometimes they infiltrate people in conservative parties and right-wing parties. And what confuses people even more is the Russian politics, because Mr. Vladimir Putin is smart enough to understand he has to conquer the hearts and minds of the conservative people. So he proposes some ideas that usually are understood as very conservative. But the relation between Russian politics and the communist movement is now very subtle, very complicated. It has many undertones and many different levels of language. So they specialize in confusing people. But the fact is that they are now more powerful than ever. That's it. And people, read these books.
Pretty good. So Jeff.
Yes.
We spoke about some mistakes that America people are starting doing. For example, I spoke with Jeff Olavo. I spoke with him that in 1995 we didn't have public service, private service for phones, and almost nobody in Brazil had phones or in their house or cell phones. That was kind of new. And later on, when we started having private companies, now you can go to the most poor area in Brazil and you will see a poor guy probably that have no so much to eat, but he using WhatsApp and his smartphone, because the free market and our healthcare is much public than private. It's more public than private. And I spoke to him that, for example, Obamacare is such a lie that people need to understand that that will not work. So, beside of this topic, we have many lies in America that you guys know, because I'm among legends here, so I'm very happy. It's kind of epic for us. But most of Americans, they still believe in these lies because they don't know what is the reality indeed. So in Brazil, we have this reality. We are crying for free market. We are crying for freedom and, for example, gun-free zone. We want to fight against gun control, and sometimes people in America, the average American, they see like this. They see this like, probably it's some mistake to get gun-free zone. You see, because they are good. The state will take care of us, but it's a big mistake. So what should you say, Jeff? about these mistakes and these lies that people are believing, seeing Brazilian situation, seeing Ukraine situation?
Well, it's interesting what Olavo just said, that people in Brazil are waking up, and this is what Diana and myself and other conservatives in the United States would like to see happen in America. And it is an issue of cowardice. People are afraid, and the biggest mistake they make is they think, oh, well, it's not going to affect me. I'm going to help myself. My career, it comes first, and they take this selfish approach, and this they allow themselves to be divided and conquered. And yes, like Olavo says, it's confusion. And yes, they seem to be invisible. And so, you know, I had a mortifying experience the other day. I was meeting with a friend who is a medical student, and some younger fellow, some undergraduate he dragged along with him, started questioning me. I'd mentioned that I did some writing, and this fellow wanted to know all about it, and I didn't know him. I didn't really want to talk politics. He kept badgering me until he got the idea that I was anti-communist or pro-American, and he ended up calling me a cracker and a redneck, and it was I kind of got upset with him, and I told him off, and I said, you know, you're just being brainwashed by your professors. You don't understand. You're too young to understand. You've been miseducated. And I could see the look of shock on his face that somebody would say this to him, because I believe he'd never heard it before in his life. And there's so many people who have not heard the truth, who've not had it explained, because one of the things they do, that they've done in education, and I come out of education in America, is that they play with the context. So you'll see a lot of times the facts that they're giving you are right, but they're limited. And they've taken away the context of those facts. And so they're crippling the young people's ability to evaluate what they're seeing in the moment and what's happened in the past. So, Diana, would you agree with that?
Oh, yes, I would, definitely. And I also would like to just thank Olavo for those extremely kind words, and I'm thrilled to know you use my book and Jeff's book in your teaching. I would also say that if it only took Brazilians 20 years to figure this out, they're just so far ahead of us. And I'm wondering if perhaps the communists did not infiltrate the education system as they have extensively here. I think that this is probably an unsung story of the subversion. When we talk about it in America, even the historians or journalists who cover it, who are interested, we tend to think of it in terms of our political department, the White House. Somewhat, there were famous hearings about Hollywood, but the education establishment is probably really the beachhead of everything, and I think that has not, to my knowledge, has not been at least updated so that people understand it, because the control, the conditioning, I actually don't know that many people make the decision not to you know, accept reality or deal with the facts, so much as they are so conditioned they have little comprehension. I mean, getting back to the notion of being a fish, do you recognize water? It's so pervasive, and I think one of the genius aspects of communism in its success in America has been to take our capacity, our mental, our logic capacity, and just invert it along with the attack on morality. Once, I think Solzhenitsyn actually discussed this and talked about, once you have good and evil in quotation marks of irony, you know, the idea that there is no good and there is no evil, but it's something changeable or relative, you really have lost your bearings to such a point. And I think it starts with the attack on morality and religion, and then reality itself, the way to appreciate reality, and it does become a matter of dealing in certain facts. I mean, this is basic disinformation out of the Soviet Union, right? The facts may be true, but they're very limited, they're selected, they create a whole different context, and that has become a place where people seem to want to live in this kind of alternate reality, which is something that in American Betrayal that I really tried to back to its source, because it struck me, was there a time when this way of dealing with facts became the accepted way in our elites, our establishment, our political power blocks, places where people can dispense power, and that's why it was the American-Soviet relationship going back to 1933, which is when Franklin Roosevelt recognized the new Bolshevik regime, dictatorship in the Soviet Union. There had been 4 American presidents who refused to recognize the Bolsheviks after the Russian Revolution. They had their reasons, and I think a lot of it had to do with knowing you could not make a relationship with an abnormal state that was dedicated to your destruction. So once Franklin Roosevelt made this determination that you could deal with such a state, in order to appear to have normal relations, you had to pretend things were normal. And so you see this pattern emerge whereby at the institutional level, because of course people have always lied and told each other fairy tales and made believe and all. That's why we have a commandment against lying. It goes back a very long way. But you start seeing it in the government sphere, in the public sphere, in ways I don't think you see before in the United States. And what this leads to is a pattern of lying, a pattern of ignoring, for example, the Soviet efforts to overthrow the United States, which were underway at the time of recognition in 1933, and then only increased with agents, with front groups, with all manner of subversion. And so in order to make between Washington and Moscow, Washington had to pretend everything was fine. And in what I argue is that this set about a new way of dealing with the world, with facts, with morality, with good, evil, with right, wrong, with black, white, with day, night. I mean everything. And I think it is actually permeated everything in American society. It doesn't stay just in the foreign policy realm, and that this has, in a sense, inverted so much about the way people appreciate the world they're in and deal with it. They go to an alternate reality, and I think that's why we have been so ripe for this kind of subversion.
Yeah, that's it's the subversion is incredible, and the lying. I mean, people. Is it self-deception? Is it cowardice? Is it all the above? I think that it is all the above. I think that people have all kinds of different reasons. Some people just don't want to pay attention. They don't want to bother because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of detail. And one of the problems that I have is that if you try to explain this to somebody and they don't have any background, they don't know any history. Here Diana's talking about things that go back before 1933, when the United States recognized the Soviet Union and established diplomatic relations. That whole history is forgotten. The whole context is forgotten. And one of the really important things about Diana's book, for example, is that she's giving us the context back again to understand. And it's, you know, what Olavo's doing in Brazil is amazing. I mean, what you guys have done in Brazil is amazing. That Brazil, that a country has woken up. What Diana says is true. It's like, you're way ahead of us. And maybe Olavo can talk to this as to what he sees here in America, what it is, how, you know, how we're going to change it.
Well, let me tell you something. In the year 2000, I came to America because I was very impressed about American media who didn't know anything that was happening in Latin America. American media lived in a separate world, a world of illusions. Huh? And then I came here in 2000 to contact certain people and tell them what was happening. I wrote a huge report about the São Paulo Forum, the FARC, and so on. That was 1,000 pages. And I distributed it to some journalists and politicians, but nobody knew anything. When I was talking with the Latin American editor of the Washington Times, I don't remember his name, he looked at me as if I was just coming from a mental institution. Huh? He was even a little scared. Oh, this guy's crazy. Be careful. And it was amazing. I was completely amazed at this. They didn't know anything. How was this possible? I'll tell you. When Lula was first elected Brazilian president, his plan was not to impose communism in Brazil or in Latin America. His plan was to restore the communist movement, who was almost destroyed at that time. And for this, they needed money. They needed money desperate to save the Venezuelan government, to save the Cuban government, to save all the communist parties in Latin America. So Lula made a government that was composed by two opposite factors. He was a communist in culture and social legislation and so on, but he was a capitalist in economy. So this, he managed to be, he received homages. He was praised in the same week, he was praised in the World Social Forum for being faithful to communism, and in the World Economic Forum at Davos for having adhered to capitalism in the same week. Oh, he was not a guy, he was two guys. And this confused everybody. And the Americans knew only the agreeable, the fair part of the story. They said, Lula is our friend, he's making business with us. Of course he is, because they needed money. And in this government, the Dilma Rousseff, everything got a little clearer, because she started to distributing money to Angola, to Cuba, to Argentina, to Venezuela, but lots and lots of money. They built huge works of roads and ports and airports everywhere except in Brazil. And then I started understanding what was the politics. In 2015, the FARC wrote a letter to the Lula's party, the Workers' Party Brazil, saying, we thank you because you saved the communist movement that was almost destroyed. You saved it. This is 2015. And so this was the mission of the Workers' Party in Brazil, not to create a Brazilian communism, but to restore the whole of the communist movement in Latin America, and they did it. You see, now the São Paulo Forum has 2,000 organization members. And in Brazil, they had managed to destroy all possible opposition. If you see Brazil, how it was, let's say, 7 or 8 years ago, there was no opposition, not even pure ideological or cultural opposition. I was the only one. When I say this, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not making propaganda of myself. This is true. For 15 years, I have been the only one who wrote about the São Paulo Forum, about Brazilian communism, and bit by bit, everybody adopted the motto, Olavo is right. And now they go to this meetings, this protest marches with signs, Olavo is right. Because I was really telling the truth. I'm not exaggerating. And I believe that if this was possible in Brazil, it's possible here. The difficulty here is that the cultural revolution managed to dominate most of the universities and most of the intellectual minds here. This is still the problem. And what is even worse is that the communists have been doing such absurd things that you cannot believe. This is, it sounds even stupid. as the story of Barack Obama documents. I remember a journalist called Debbie Schlusser was the first to tell that Obama's selective service was fake. And this sounds so absurd. Everybody said, this girl is crazy. But it sounds really stupid. How can a guy become the American president using falsified fake documents? Well, this happened. And most people, even the conservative ranks, didn't want to pay attention to this because it sounded very, very stupid. But this was the main point. I said that Obama's falsified documents is the main point of American politics. Not the problem of where he was born. He was born in Kenya, on the planet Mars, or in Brazil. This is not important. The important is that he is using false documents. He's a criminal. But nobody wanted to pay attention. They said, no, we have to attack him by other more important questions. There is no more important question than the identity of a guy.
You're so right.
Yeah,
yes, I could not agree with you more. I'm so happy to hear you say that. It's something I covered quite a lot as a journalist and had tremendous pushback. My column was syndicated for 15 years in a number of newspapers, and I had tremendous pushback, not from the smaller papers across the country, but from some of the larger papers in Washington, D.C., for example, where my column ran in the Washington Times first and then the Washington Examiner. And those papers, the conservative papers, would not cover the story. And I actually took my what documentation, what evidence I had at one point in this ongoing saga of Obama and his false document trail to the editor to show him, because he had actually refused a column of mine one week, and I thought, well, maybe he doesn't understand what I'm looking at. And I went to him and I laid out what I had in my files at the time, and he actually said to me, "It's not that I don't believe you, Diana, it's that I do. It's that I do." But he was afraid that if we publish this in his paper, which is actually giving quite a lot of importance to his newspaper, I would add, it would somehow cause blood in the streets, that we would see such a reaction. And I just could not believe this, and I just said to him, what you are saying tells me we do not have rule of law any longer. If this is true, and we must keep it to ourselves because we may have social unrest over the consequences, we live in a thugocracy. We don't live in a place with rule of law. But that was my direct experience with one of these supposedly conservative papers. Now I will say that many journalists on the right, I think, don't know anything about the story. They have taught themselves not to look at it. It is not good for your career. It is dangerous. People might look at you funny or not invite you to parties. I mean, these are the kinds of, this is our gulag today. You don't get a party invitation. It seems to control people. But this is the story of the century, at least in America. I mean, it's really the biggest story that ever happened in America. A president gets elected with fake ID. And as you say, it doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter, that in itself is a huge story uncovered. And I would add, the people who are supposed to deal with this, who swear an oath to our Constitution in the Congress, have absolutely abdicated their duty. It's one thing for ink-stained wretches, for journalists by the dozen to be who they are, but people who actually swear an oath to the Constitution, I don't know how they go on.
Yeah, and I think, Diana, one of the things you're touching on is why this editor doesn't want to touch it. I think, and this is my conclusion, it's people have become hedonistic in our society, and comfort is so important to them, and they feel profoundly uncomfortable with this material, with this truth. So they turn away from it because it makes them uncomfortable, and the main point of their existence is to be comfortable. And this has become a bad thing. Yeah, I mean, it's become a horrible thing with us that we sought comfort so long that now we don't seek anything else. Is that your sense of one of the things he was feeling?
Yes, I think that there. Yes, I think that is very true. I mean, we certainly did not see that need for comfort, though, when the Washington Post was going after Richard Nixon back in the Watergate days. I mean, they were going for his scalp, and they got it. There was no fear of unrest in the country, and so on. I mean, it gets back to Obama's greatest asset, which is the fact that he is half black, which becomes his protective cover for fear of people being attacked as racists for noticing that his ID is fake. I mean, the whole thing is really does speak to a lot of moral emptiness on the part of everyone, and in terms of being afraid of truth for how people will twist it. So you see again this conditioning that Americans have become subject to. It really does speak to all kinds of psychoses in the America circa 2015, certainly. But yeah, comfort level, not speaking the language of your peers. I think so much of this is, again, ideological. Most journalists are not driven by an interest in facts or curiosity even, but how to fit the template, and this did not fit. And so if you covered it, you are to this day excoriated or ignored. And so the story, even among people who covered it, sort of languishes, because what more can you say? It just sits there.
Jeff,
yeah.
We have some questions here. I'm receiving many commentaries here, but you know, people want to talk about many topics at the same time. I would like to see Diana, Olavo, and Jeff back here in Update Brazil to talk just about election fraud and vote machine. That's a pretty good topic to talk about. But we have no much time. Our talk show is just beginning. You know, we will do that several times, and I would just like, because a friend of mine from Pennsylvania, he's asking, is somebody translating Olavo de Carvalho works? And I want to say that we have olavodeccarvalho.org/English, and then you can read Olavo de Carvalho in English. So a friend of mine just asked me that, and that's pretty important. One thing Olavo done in Brazil was the fact that he put us in contact with the liberal arts. In Brazil, unfortunately, we don't have bachelor degree in liberal arts. We don't have master degree. We don't have nothing in liberal arts. If you talk with Brazilian people about liberal arts, they don't know what is that. So Olavo de Carvalho, he brought that to us. He brought to us homeschooling. He brought to us how to think. You know, teaching logic, teaching all kinds of all the subjects of liberal arts. So this is a pretty important thing that he did in Brazil. More important than talk about politics. He usually teach us as a student. I can tell you, he always he charge us like, if you want to fight against politics, you need to be wise. So I am teaching you how to be a wise people, not just politician people, but wise people. This is, I think, this is the big key that Olavo, to understand Olavo in Brazil. We are about to end. Okay, it's kind of finishing our talk show. Unfortunately, I would like to talk more and more and more, but I hope we will have you guys more times here.
To.
Yeah, it's a great honor to have you, Diana, and Nyquist and Olavo.
Oh, thank you.
I thank you guys a lot.
When will be the next time?
Sorry?
When will be the next time?
Yes.
Good. Yeah.
Perhaps in October.
Okay.
Sure.
Pretty good.
It's a date.
We'll set up a date in October. We'll make it happen again in October because this discussion has to go on, and Americans need to learn about Brazil for sure. Update Brazil, and I, just listening to this is fascinating, and it's all important. The sharing the experience of what we've gone through here and what you guys are going through over there, and it's an ongoing saga. It's changing all the time, so it's very exciting.
Yeah, another thing it's very interesting between Brazil and America is, for example, the popularity of Donald Trump, and in Brazil the popularity of Bolsonaro, Jair Bolsonaro. Both speak what people want to hear, and without any help of the established media. So the media here, I mean, almost 24 hours a day, they try to say many lies about Olavo de Carvalho, about Jair Bolsonaro, and that doesn't work at all. You go to the street and you talk with people. Now, for example, Diana and Jeff, if you go to the store, I'm not kidding, a friend of mine, Rodolfo, is here, he's a testimony. If you go to the store and talk with people about Foro de São Paulo, people knows about it. It's something like you can't imagine. It's a few years ago, if you just talk about it with people, they would say it's kind of you're paranoid. What is that? You think they are controlling everything, and this is crazy. Now, if someone says, no, Foro de São Paulo does exist, we need to hold older people because they could beat this person. Like, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? Foro de São Paulo is so clear. You can see that. Now it's the upside down. That was really hard to talk about it at the time. But nowadays, if you talk about Foro de São Paulo, everyone knows that. Even in store, I mean, even average people. I record a video before the first big manifestation. I record a video with a guy who he used to work in construction. Okay, he used to work in construction. He told me, I know Olavo de Carvalho. I know him. I watch him. I listen to him, and he's great. Do you know him? He was so proud that I was Olavo de Carvalho's friend. So can you imagine that a guy that works in construction and people that is in a store, they talk about Foro de São Paulo. So this is very, very exciting. And I do believe that it is. It's fantastic. And I do believe Update Brazil is just a start. We can make this bridge not just between Brazil and United States. I spoke with Nyquist that we need to do something like an international convention of the conservative throughout the world. We need to start to get in touch. Socialism, they have international conventions. They have many think tanks, and they are connected. Okay, all the world are connected. And what about us? This is the question I want to make now. The last question of this talk show today. What we can do to get in touch with the conservatives throughout the world, not just American conservative or Brazilian conservative talking alone and not getting in touch. What we can do to get to make a reunion, like put all together physically at the same place and talk about communism and make our own agenda. I mean, put people to understand that we need to make it like a coalition, like I think that's it. Jeff, what do you think?
Well, I mentioned this to a security analyst in Washington yesterday. I mentioned your idea of a conservative international, and he immediately said, that's a great idea. He says, of course, conservative international is a contradiction in terms, of course, which is a problem, but he was thinking in his mind, oh, if we could only unite people and share experiences, and you know, it's impossible to fight against communism without a strategy, without learning, and without sharing information and actions. So I think there's something in what you're saying. Something should be done, and why not promote it here?
Well, the problem is the inexistence of intense contacts between the conservative movements in several countries. For example, I used to read the American conservatives and the French conservatives, but they are so different, differently minded, that any dialogue is almost impossible. Because, you know, here in America, most of conservatives are Jews, and in France, they don't like Jews, because you know, this come from the First World War, when they thought that Jews were German agents. They have a problem with Jews. So we have to overcome this difficulty, because all this is stupid. They're all old traditions that make no sense anymore. But it's important that French conservatives know some things that American conservatives don't know, and vice versa. This contact, this dialogue is very, very, very important. We have to overcome these difficulties. But we should have hope, because 20 years ago, the situation was much worse in Brazil than it has never been in America. Because there was no opposition. The communists managed to dominate everybody. Everybody and everything, the university, the media, the judicial system, everything. So that when I published my first books, The New Age and Cultural Revolution in 93, and The Collective Imbecile in 95, nobody even understood what I was talking about. The communists understood, and they didn't like, of course. But everybody else, they didn't understand what I was talking about, because it sounds so strange. Now everybody knows everything. If this happened in Brazil, it can happen here.
Diana, your thoughts?
Hello?
Yeah,
yes?
Your thoughts?
Well, I think it's a very good idea. I apologize for the hammering outside. Someone's building a house. But just quickly, maybe it's a matter of a self-selecting group that is very focused on anti-communism. People who are interested in that would eliminate quite a number, I'm afraid, of American conservatives who don't think about these things anymore and think it's all settled. So it might be a small group to start with, but I think it is a very good idea, because there is definitely a need for it in terms of just people understanding that they're not crazy and that there are these same patterns abroad, and just even if it starts small, I think it's a very good idea, excellent idea.
Oh, very good, very good.
And this hammer, Diana, is a sign of what we are building now. We are building a.
Yes, very nice. Yes, I like that.
Yes, we are
no
building,
signal.
Yeah, we are building a new idea. We are building this idea that we cannot be alone. We are bigger. Olavo de Carvalho used to say us, you are not alone. You are bigger than them. You know, like you say that you should start a small group, then, right? That's true. But the little by little, that will grow so much. Yeah. Like in Brazil. In Brazil, when, for example, Olavo de Carvalho told us, you need to take the street over. You need to go to the street and make protests against communism. Communism used to use the street to claim their subjects. Now it's time to go to the street and show them that they are not the majority. You know, most of the people are against communism. So it's just a small group. I would say, Diana, that they are small. We are not. We are big, and we just need to show that to people. And once we show that, more and more people will just join us, and they will fight against communism. Well, way better than now. I think so. So our talk show is about to finish, and I would like again to thank Olavo de Carvalho, my professor, I love him so much. And, Mr. Nyquist, Jeff, thank you very much to create this breed and help me to do that. And Diana, I have no words to thank you, and I hope you come back as soon as possible.
Oh, thank you. I will. I've enjoyed it mightily.
Yeah. All right. All right. Bye-bye, all. Thank you for joining the show. Hope that we'll get together soon.
Read these books.
Yeah.
And Olavo is right, folks. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.